The state session that was one of a kind for so many reasons is technically not over yet because of that divide that remains over how and how much to spend starting July 1st and how and whether to cut your taxes. We take that and the new immigration blueprint to our Miami-Dade and Broward lawmakers right here with us today. State Representative Christine Hunschofsky is a Democrat from Parkland, repping Central and West Broward County. She's also a member of the Select Committee on Property Taxes. And State Representative Alex Rizo is a Republican whose district runs from Hialeah to the airport and Miami and is former chair of Miami-Dade's Republican Party. Great to have you both right at the table. I know you both got a chance to see Larry Keefe's interview, and I want to talk about immigration in a minute, but I really do want to start with the budget because TikTok, Alex Rizo, the Republicans have a supermajority. They presumably can get everything done in one party, and Democrats have a hard time refuting it. And yet, in an unprecedented manner, here we are without a budget on May, whatever today is, 17th. What is happening that you know to get over the line in the sand in a quick?
Okay. Well, you said it in your introduction. It's taxes and cutting spending.
That's where the impasse is.
That's where the impasse is. And it's not really an impasse. This is just a disagreement. And so both the Senate and the House have our clear understanding as to what we would like to do, and the governor has his understanding as to what to do. We all agree that we want to cut taxes for Floridians. How we do that, in the manner that we do that, we need to be responsible. And so right now we're talking about property taxes, and that impacts municipalities. And we want to make sure that at least the long arm of government from Tallahassee isn't just a cudgel coming in and saying you can't do this, you can't do that. We want to make it right for everyone.
So interesting to hear someone from Tallahassee talking about that. Yeah, I mean, a lot of it depends on Tallahassee, a lot of municipal budgets. We actually have Fort Lauderdale, Broward County's Mayor Beam Fur waiting to come on for a segment, and we'll talk all about that. Christine Hunschofsky, you are on the Select Committee for the House, looking at all of these. The governor kind of sets it up with, well, I want property taxes cut, they want sales tax, you can't do both. But I don't think that is what you're looking at. I think there is no either or yet. You're looking at everything. But what you've had a second meeting, or is there a move towards something?
Yeah, so right now we're doing a lot of research, and I think it's really important. What was interesting that came up at our last meeting on Tuesday is the wide differences that we have in how cities and counties are funded. Some of them are very much funded by their ad valorem taxes. Some of them were property tax, 98%. And others were only 10% of their revenues were coming from property taxes. So I think it's just really important when we're looking at the property tax situation, who are we trying to benefit? What do people want from their government? What do they expect? What services do they expect from their local and county governments? And then how are we making sure that we're not having outcomes that we didn't anticipate, such as lowering any size of the first responders or anything like that.
Right, and so many of the important services locally rely on that. But hey, talk to me in a general way that one of the really important things in this session was the sort of the doging of state government and getting rid of waste. I think everybody's kind of on board with that. What is, now that we're in this point in the budget, what waste have you identified? Oh, let me not be so harsh on the waste word. What have you identified that is very cuttable without getting to the bone?
And I think that's one of the questions and one of the issues that's coming up, and why there isn't that agreement yet on the budget. We have Amy, who comes to us from the Office of Economic and Demographic Research. She comes every year and gives us—
Making Amy a cult figure.
And she comes to us with an outlook of what the state budget's going to look like for the upcoming years. And for several years now, it's already shown that in 2026 and 2027, that fiscal year, we start to begin to have a budget deficit. So now the question becomes, what can we cut? What's cuttable? And we saw throughout the process, at least on the House, in the House committees, where a lot of the state agencies were brought in and really questioned about their spending, about their employee levels, and what was necessary and what was not necessary. We don't in any way want to make services harder to access or make it harder on our residents to get the things that they need, such as driver's licenses or anything like that. But we also want to make sure that we're running the government efficiently, because back home, I think all of our households, we can talk about how expensive it's become, especially to live in South Florida, and we're all tightening our belts at home, and our government should do the same.
Have you identified anything that is an obvious cut? However difficult, any cut is going to be difficult to somebody, but have you identified anything that is obviously the low-hanging fruit?
The low-hanging, yes, Glenna, actually, yes. The simple answer is yes. And early on in our session, we did identify that there were a number of open positions, so personnel positions that have been open for the past year, for example. That's the low-hanging fruit. And typically when you look at any budget of any large operation, your personnel is the largest percentage of that budget. So that's one of the things that we are looking at.
Let me ask you something about something I've read about that. Is that open positions in government, the salaries were being used to beef up salaries for people who were there and maybe not paid very well. Have you found that?
No, I haven't heard that at all.
Okay, I guess that's good. We'll check that out. But so open positions, and how many? Because the
it all
personnel
depends.
costs are the big kahuna.
Exactly, but you can imagine in a budget of $115, $117 billion in a state with 23 million residents, you can imagine that there's a lot. If you're looking at 15 in this particular department, 50 in this particular department, it starts to add up. That's the low-hanging fruit. Now, I'm sure that we are going to continue to investigate and look at it. I know the governor wants to do it. I know the speaker and the president both want to do it. We've talked about it. I think it's something that we'd like to see it start to affect and kind of trickle down into our municipalities. And there's a number of municipalities that have actually said that they're going to sign on with this whole DOGE program with the federal government. So I'm glad that we're going to start looking at that to see where we can become efficient.
Because there is such a line in the sand, because both chambers have gone home. I mean, you're here, which I'm glad for, but not working on the budget. What is the possibility of a state government shutdown?
I think they're going to figure it out. If you listen to Speaker Danny Perez on Tuesday, he basically said he wants us to tighten our belts and that he was open to what that would look like. And he said that right from when we were on the floor of the House. So I believe they're looking at various options. And I think they will get to where they need to get to, because with all due respect, we have to get there. We can't afford a government shutdown. The people we serve cannot afford a government shutdown. And it's just a question of how we get there.
Because we're talking about an impasse over how to cut taxes, but there's also no top line allocations yet. Those don't even exist yet.
Well, the thing is this, and I would say the way I'm looking at it, and I think the way it really is we don't have an impasse. We have a disagreement. And again, this is the way government is.
Does that depend who you talk to?
Well, it
Just
depends,
saying.
but you're talking to two people that are there, okay?
Right.
You're here.
And so we don't have an impasse. We have negotiations that have been going on. We have disagreements on how to get there. The governor wants us to have a tighter budget. The speaker wants us to have a tighter budget. I believe, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the Senate, I believe the president wants us to have a tighter budget as well. How we get there? Well, we've just disagreed on the way that we get there. But we want to get there. That is the target, okay? And certainly property taxes, I think, are probably that's the elephant in the room. How do we get there? As you see, Representative Hunschofsky has been on that committee already. Yeah. And for example, one of the ideas that come out that says, well, let's cut property taxes for everyone that's a certain age and older, our elderly population that's been in their home for a certain amount of time. That on the whole looks wonderful. However, when you have a municipality, look right here, you've got Hallandale Beach, for example, Sunny Isles, you've got a number of people that the majority of them are retirees. What does that do to that municipality's budget? So again, Florida is such a dynamic and diverse state that we've got to take a look at this, and I think you're seeing the issue. This is an important issue, and you're seeing the ramifications of looking at this. Remember,
That's why we're here.
That's
our sole reason for existence.
And remember,
at this moment.
we are a part-time legislature. So we're there only a certain window of time.
We're all part-time, and yet we all work double time.
Yeah.
Let me stop there. We have to take a quick break. We'll come back. I want to wrap this up, and we'll talk immigration as well. So stay with us.
we're going to have a budget.
Sometimes we are going to be airing our commercial breaks because they're really interesting. Back here with Alex Rizo, Christine Hunschofsky, two of your South Florida lawmakers. Can we move on, or do you still want to talk about the budget?
I think it's important when we are talking about the budget to realize that the property tax situation is only dealing with our counties and our cities. It has nothing to do with the state budget, and there is some tightening that does need to happen.
Yeah, and that actually is something we will definitely talk about later in this hour. What I really want to do with our time that we have here left, you watched the interview with Larry Keefe from our immigration czar. Speaking of budget, the budget allocation for this new immigration effort, $300 million, not quite $300 million, for more personnel, for more training, to do all of those things that the new immigration law mandates. Alex, your position on, you come from very immigrant-rich communities, both of you, and there's a lot of concern looking at this. Give me your take on it.
I think the director's right on point. I think the governor was right on point when he said, look, let's kind of work with our federal partners on this. I think that obviously you saw that we had a special session where we did this. They negotiated between the president, the speaker, and the governor, and we came out with something that now we have enacted. I think Floridians have already said we need to work on this together. You heard from the director's own comments, about 15% of the law enforcement in Florida is federal, but the largest portion of obviously dealing with immigration, we've got 70,000 right now that are in the process of possibly losing their status and having to be deported. How do you do that with only 15% of our population of law enforcement to do that?
So that's not a federal issue for them to figure out?
Well, I think it's a federal issue, but it's something that you've got to work hand in hand with state authorities. Obviously, us here in Florida, we are one of the states that deal with immigration.
Tip of the spear.
Tip of the spear, gateway to the Americas, everything else as you can imagine. And I think when you poll it, you see that people, on the whole, are very pro this type of immigration enforcement.
So the 280G agreements, where local law enforcement optionally can opt in to train and work with ICE, that was pretty controversial at the start. However, that was just something that they needed ICE to come oversee. The federal oversight was still there. To your point, it was kind of like a force enhancer with that federal oversight. Now, as of last week, at least 100 or so Florida Highway Patrol troopers don't need that. Now it is a state thing. Now it is a state operation. And that's not a political statement at all. That concerns a lot of people for a variety of reasons. Should it?
Yeah, it should for a variety of reasons, and one of them is due process, right? We've seen a couple of stories now about citizens who are being detained, and it's very concerning. Listen, we all want safer communities, we all want our broken immigration system to be fixed, but without due process, none of us, to a certain extent, are safe. And
so when you talk to me about due process, the process is still in place. I mean, there are laws by which these people operate.
Yes, there are also judges' orders that are given and sometimes also not followed. So I just think we have to make sure that we're following the law, that we're following and making sure everybody has due process. And then on the federal level, absolutely we need immigration reform.
Yeah, and we've been talking about that for my entire career, I think, and yours. So what I had asked, the Division of Emergency Management Director, Kevin Guthrie, he's been on this program so many times, a master of logistics on a grand scale, and he, as you heard, has been tapped by the state to eventually, if and when this blueprint is rolled out, to do the mass logistics of detention and deportation via the state. Any concerns with that?
No, none whatsoever. I think that he's going to do a magnificent job. There's a lot of eyes on this operation,
I didn't mean
obviously.
to him. Everybody, by
Everybody
all
involved.
accounts, he is the gold standard of logistics.
Yeah.
I meant on the state taking over what is now federal detention and deportation of individuals. I guess to Christine's point, if there is due process, everyone goes through, that is the law. Any concerns that might not happen?
Well, look, it's like any large operation, are there going to be wrinkles and hiccups along the way? I don't think that there will be as many as some people are saying, okay? But no one signed on to this law to say we're going to break the law and we're not going to give people due process, okay? No place is like America when it comes to dealing with its immigrants, okay? And so I think what you're going to see is you will see a process that is very comprehensive, that is thoughtful. If we do make a mistake, I'm sure it's going to be addressed immediately, and we're going to see how it goes. I think it is going to go very well. And again, this is something that Americans have said we need. We need to work with our federal partners. Now,
any constituents call you and with any concerns of any kind?
Not a one to my office, not a one. In fact, when I'm on the street and talking to people in Tallahassee, when I'm talking to people and meeting with constituents that come up there and we bring it up to see how it goes, we probe them, they're saying absolutely we need to fix the problem. Legal immigration, as you know, and as we talked on the show before, has been an issue for years that has been impacting especially South Florida more so than the rest of the country. When it comes to housing crises, this is one of the issues that we see. When it comes to illegal, well, obviously the immigration trade itself, when we're talking about human trafficking, drugs, so many other things.
Yeah, the border issues. I think everyone's on board with a secure border.
I think where people do have concerns and where our office hears concerns, people are having issues getting their driver's licenses in a timely manner.
The people who live here.
The people who live here. Immigration is never a concern that I've heard at any of our town halls. My concern on this whole scale, and if it's being done by the Florida Department of Emergency Management, is this going to take away resources from other things at times when we need them, from a hurricane response and all of that. So as we're looking to scale back a budget, given that we see a budget deficit is anticipated in already starting in 2026, 2027, are we making sure that we're using our state dollars in the most efficient and effective way possible, keeping our community safe, but also making sure that all members of our community are safe and getting their due process? That
sounds like a goal everyone's going to get behind. This is uncharted waters, really, so you'll be back talking more. Christine Hunschofsky, Alex Rizo, always great to have you here.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us, Glenna.
Of course.